Sometimes I work with beginning counselors who are sitting a certain way because that's the way that therapists sit, and they're wearing certain clothes, although I am kind of wearing my therapist outfit today, and they try to play the role of a counselor. And so as I have settled in, it's been really important as part of that growing, journeying process to really know that what I bring, my humor, my serious tone, my sarcasm from time to time, my intensity, actually is the really beautiful part in what clients need. And in the beginning, it's easy to say, I can't be my true self. I have to put on this role of a counselor. And it's really who you are and what we bring that makes us unique and builds the therapeutic relationship.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, helping leaders live with integrity.
Welcome back. And I'm so excited for this conversation because we get to talk about something that's near and dear to my own heart, and that is being a counselor. So if you're a counselor, an aspiring counselor, maybe you're emerging or you're seasoned, this is particularly for you. Or maybe you just want to eavesdrop into the conversation because you have a counselor and you're like, what's it like for them? But this conversation is not only near and dear to my heart, but it's with someone who is also near and dear to my heart. We have Dr. Michelle Engelbloom-Dangelman, and she is our clinical director at Living Wholehearted, but she's got a lot of experience. So I want to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to dive into a wonderful conversation. So Dr. Michelle is what we call her. She is a tenured professor at George Fox. She oversees the counseling there and is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's an international speaker. She's a researcher, a supervisor, a teacher, and she lives right outside Portland, Oregon. She's also a wife, a mom, and definitely has a lot of fun hobbies on the side that tell you a little bit about her. She knows a lot about bugs. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But she's a runner, a reader, a learner, and she's recently published her first book, which I'm so excited about. It's called The Heart of Counseling, Discovering and Embracing Your Authentic Self as a Therapist. Welcome, Dr. Michelle.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Yay. Okay, so let's just start with a little bit about you. We've had you on the podcast before where we've talked about marriages. That really is your specialty as a therapist, being an emotionally focused therapist and a trainer and a supervisor in that lens. But today we're just going to talk about being a therapist. So talk about your journey to becoming a counselor and your passion for the new counselor.
Yeah. My journey, probably like many others, to becoming a counselor was a little bit roundabout. My undergraduate degree is actually in biology and natural science. So you mentioned the bugs. I'm like, oh yeah, that's part of what I love to do. I just don't love to get paid for it. So I came out of that degree wanting to be a physical therapist too. So the helping part was there. And that wasn't it. And I really leaned into, based on some of my own personal experiences with others and with my own life, wondering about counseling. And so I took for my first couple of courses and I loved it. I fell in love with being in sacred spaces with other humans, feeling really unqualified in many ways to do that, but felt really called to it. So I got my master's degree, got my doctorate degree because I also love teaching others to sit in those spaces with other people. And so I love the balance that I have right now with teaching counselors how to be counselors, but then also being in the trenches, doing the work, working with couples, doing counseling with counselors, some individuals too.
I love it. The variety is life-giving and something we'd encourage a lot of counselors to do, to have a variety, to be able to make it in this field long-term. Now, something that I learned early on in my career, being in the field for about 20 years, I started out in full-time ministry, resisted going into become a therapist, but also felt very called. So out of obedience, went to school. But I noticed that sitting with a lot of counselors over the years, we can actually get pretty unhealthy if we stay in this field and don't do our own work. So talk a little bit about that, Michelle, just some of the things that people don't know when they enter the field. What would you kind of say, okay, long term, these are the effects of the work that we do. Here's what you need. Buckle up. Here's some of the key things I want you to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprises most beginning therapists and students is their own stuff, their own baggage that they carry into the counseling room that initially we think we can keep out. We think my baggage is nice and secure over there outside of the counseling office, but it really isn't. It infiltrates our work. And so doing our own work as clinicians is incredibly important. And sometimes it's overwhelming, or we think we can trick people, ourselves, our clients, our supervisors into thinking we don't really need to do the work. But those ghosts, that baggage can follow us in pretty detrimental ways, lead to burnout, lead to unhealthy choices, unhealthy boundaries. So that's what I would say is it's our own baggage, and you've got to do the work that you're walking with other people as they do their work too.
Well, it seems like a no-brainer, honestly, and yet I still don't think a lot of programs or a lot of counselors realize how much we've got to do our work. It's going to get bumped up against throughout. We talk about countertransference and transference. Cognitively, counselors know this, but why do you think it's not as typical in the field? I think this is something you teach, you supervise, you help clinicians do their work, but it's not as common. Why do you think that is in our field?
I think a couple of things. I think people try to just beat the system. Like, other people need counseling, but not me. And then I think it's hard to ask for help. It's hard if you are a helper to say, I'm a helper and I'm competent and I'm good at what I do and I need help. That paradigm is a little tricky for people. It's tricky to just feel confident and competent, but also have the humility to say, I can be both. I can both need help and be a helper. And it's a tricky paradigm.
It is. It reminds me of Henry Nouwen's book, The Wounded Healer, recognizing we're both, and even as followers of Christ, we are growing and we need Jesus, and we are helping others along the way get to know him. And so it really is like, oh yeah, duh. But there's this resistance, and I think you pointed to it, is the counseling field draws a certain kind of person.
Yes.
The helper types, whatever assessment you use, you're already coming up with the label for it. But it draws people who are either really curious about humans or really just their heart aches for humans and the struggles that we have. So the only way that we can really help people is to do our own stuff and get our baggage down to carry-on size, what we say at Living Wholehearted. One of the things that you and I are both passionate about is helping therapists be healthy leaders. I mean, we're leading in such profound, sacred ways in the depths of people's lives. And so to have our own sense of integrity and showing up with who we are, you are passionate about this. So talk about your own journey to becoming authentic and figuring out how to become the kind of therapist you are.
Oh, that's a great question. I would say I'm still on that journey. So it's not a past tense, it's a current tense, although I have sure learned a lot along the way. I think it starts both inside the counseling room and outside the counseling room. So in the counseling room, it can start with even just the basics of, are you comfortable in your chair? Sometimes I work with beginning counselors who are sitting a certain way because that's the way that therapists sit, and they're wearing certain clothes, although I am kind of wearing my therapist outfit today, and they try to play the role of a counselor. And so as I have settled in, it's been really important as part of that growing, journeying process to really know that what I bring, my humor, my serious tone, my sarcasm from time to time, my intensity actually is the really beautiful part in what clients need. And in the beginning, it's easy to say, I can't be my true self. I have to put on this role of a counselor. And it's really who you are and what we bring that makes us unique and builds the therapeutic relationship. And so it's really been a process of self-discovery. Like, no, how I am created is such an important part of the healing process. And if I try to be somebody else or act like somebody else, mentors get to be a tricky process because we want to emulate all these people that we admire and we want to be more like, but we have to find that in our own way. So doing what they do, but through our own unique way of being and connecting.
Yeah, I love that, Michelle. And it does take time because we're holding the tension of making room. It's a unique space, more unique than most spaces that we enter in because we are trained to not bring our own stuff into the room. And in most relationships, it's a give and take, right? I have a voice, you have a voice. But as counselors, we're often trained to say, well, you need to whitewash your entire sense of being, your voice, your belief systems, your values. It's all about the client. And so it gets confusing for new counselors coming in and going, okay, doesn't matter whether I'm married or not, or have kids or not, or been an alcoholic or not. It's really not about me. It's about you. So speak to that a little bit, the tension of the training process of learning how to be, to make room for the client to be where they are at.
Yeah.
And also bringing in all of you and your voice and even the way you sit.
Yeah, it's so important. I think it's easy for counselors to forget that how we teach our clients is how we model. So when we can show up our full selves, it allows them to do the same. There is an activity that I love doing in one of my classes at George Fox is I literally walk in the door with stacks of hats. Claire, my daughter, is 11 now, so she has many less play hats than she did before, but I walk in with a police hat and a fire hat and a astronaut and a cowboy hat, and I balance them all to really represent that we all walk into therapy rooms wearing these different hats. So my mom hat and my wife hat and my coaching hat and my daughter hat and my Christian hat. I come into this space wearing all of the hats. My goal is that my therapist hat is on top, but I can't take off the other ones. People think, oh, I just have to wear my therapist hat. Like, no, actually, my mom hat really informs and helps me connect with moms and daughters even in ways that I couldn't if I took that hat off. And so it's imperative actually that we keep our hats on, just reorganize the landscape of them so that when we're in the counseling room, our therapist hat is on top. But clients actually really love to see that we are human. We are moms and daughters, and we don't necessarily share all of our struggles and share all of our stories, but it's important for clients to know that we're human too. And it's a part of, I think, their settling into feeling more vulnerable, that we're not perfect people and we haven't arrived. We have our own stuff as well.
Yeah. In fact, perfect people are like the worst to share with. I can't find them, by the way, but when someone's portraying themselves of having it figured out, and yet there is a tension that you spoke to earlier of also, we want to be doing our work. We want to be modeling or at least practicing what we're preaching. So if I remember, after 20 years of doing this, Michelle, I laugh because it holds me accountable. I'll have done some really amazing work with a couple. And then I come home and I'm like, I probably should be doing this with my own husband.
Take my own advice.
Yeah. And to listen in the same way. So how easy it is to not practice what we preach. And so I think as counselors with such a sacred role of going into the pain and the grieving and the suffering and the confidential spaces that we're afraid to let others in, it really helps us, honestly, to be more honest and real with who we are. I think we have a greater opportunity.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the tension even with being authentic in our faith. We live in Oregon, and we have some really strong ethics, again, about making sure that clients are honored and their own spiritual faith journeys are honored. And yet you're saying, show up as who you are. And if you're a follower of Jesus. So how do you walk alongside your counselors who are trying to wrestle that out? How much do I bring that in the room? What would you say when you're thinking about the tension there?
I think one of the things that I have learned over time, and I teach when I'm working with counselors, is we can bring our faith into the room without ever saying anything about it. So how we model different value systems and faith systems can be done without speaking about it at all. I do think it's important that we check in with clients about what that means for them, whether their faith tradition is an important part of what they're hoping to bring into the counseling room. And even if my faith appears to match their own, it's also just really important that we're always curious, because we may have different ideas of prayer or different ideas of a solitude or anything. So it's important that we are just so curious about what their values mean to them and how they can be similar to ours or very different even.
Such a good point. And again, we at Living Wholehearted, we're very sensitive to even the spiritual abuses and toxic faith messages that get woven into a lot of our stories and our faith systems. So that curiosity is so important, to really recognize that even when we're using the same words, our stories inform the lens of which we understand love from the Father. I mean, what kind of father figure did you have in your life, and what was your experience of a father? So when you say love of a father, that means all kinds of things to all kinds of stories. And so I love that, remembering to stay curious and showing up that God is in us. You know, his spirit is in us and present with us. And we don't have to go around saying his name overtly for people to sense him or his peace. Even being a non-anxious presence in the midst of such anxiety and pain and suffering. That empathy that we bring is God himself showing up and embodying. Michelle, I heard this yesterday. I was speaking at a conference, and this young woman came up. I was speaking on what daughters need today and what girls are facing. And she came up, I think a youth leader, I'm guessing. She works in the church. And she was asking, I had this young girl come and said, where was God in my sexual abuse? Where was God? And she goes, I have no theology for that. I don't know how to answer her. I don't know what to say. And I think as counselors, sometimes we think we're supposed to have the answer.
Yes.
So she said, what would I do? What would I say? And I just said, you joining with her. She was weeping. And I said, and crying with her is showing up as God, the Father, and the presence of the Holy Spirit and the love of Jesus. And she just, her eyes lit up and went, oh yeah. I said, you just being with her and weeping. And recognizing that that's not how it's supposed to be.
Yes.
But holding back from answering the question, right? And so talk about what you love to do in growing these young therapists, from when like the tendency to want to answer all the questions and fix all the things in the room, to what would you say is a really healthy, mature, you got this, you're showing up authentically, and you're doing really good work. Walk us through that.
Yeah, such a great question. I would say I I hate this cliche phrase, your presence is your present. But also there's so much truth in that. And your story really mirrors that when you are arriving, you just really have faith and assurance that your presence matters. And you don't have to have the answers. There doesn't have to be this movement. I think people, just like you're saying, think they have to have answers or there has to be movement. And actually just being present and with is such a gift and is a lot of the work of a counselor, is just being right there in the moment and not having the answer. But just like your story demonstrates, just saying, I don't have the answer. I'm here with you. I don't know. I'm here. And I think that is an incredible place to find as a therapist, when you can be assured that you don't have to be moving, or whatever definition you have in your head of moving, that the peace and the empathy and the presence becomes such a sacred space between client and therapist, that is often the healing space that people need. It's just the sacredness of togetherness.
It's so true. And all of the research points to that, Dr. Michelle, right? Like
Yes.
what we see, that the brain heals in not what happens to us, but what happens after what happens to us. So when we're met with an empathetic, caring, loving presence, when we can tell our story, we can grieve, we can feel it to heal it, in my Tuesday saying, and have a witness and somebody who's just with us. We heal. And so often we just don't get that as kids, and we don't get that in our marriages, and we don't get that with our friendships, and we don't get that with our pastors. And so that's where counseling has come in as a practice of what this can look like, what this can feel like. And when we've experienced it as clients and even as counselors, the ripple effect goes out into the community. So it's profound that way. Okay. Any thoughts on that before I take you on a different direction?
Let's journey.
Okay. So many people see you, who know you, Dr. Michelle, see you as like EFT Jedi. Like you are the go-to. Everyone just is in awe of how it oozes out of you, how you're present with people and can really help them get underneath the hood without them knowing they're getting underneath the hood. But you weren't always there. That wasn't always easy for you. So talk about your early years as a counselor, some of those insecurities, normalize what the journey looked like. Maybe share some insights into your own stories.
Yeah. It's funny because I am EFT through and through, and I like sharing a story that in my master's program, we had to do some final capstone project and pick a theory and apply the theory. And the theory that I picked was cognitive behavioral theory. It's usually
really?
when I'm telling it in the classroom where people go, oh, what? Yeah. I was drawn to CBT because it's black and white. It gives me answers. It gives me direction. And I think as beginning therapists, it's really reassuring to just have an outline, talking points even. And so I was a CBT therapist when I started. And then I worked, my first couple of jobs were in residential facilities. And CBT was really effective. There's definitely time and places for CBT. It was really effective. But I just left every day feeling like I just want to hug these people who are in residential. I just want to hold them. Of course, it's not appropriate. But I just left every day feeling like there must be something more. Like they need to be held and seen and nurtured. And so really it wasn't until I started my PhD program and a professor introduced me to EFT, and it was like the heavens opened and the clouds parted. And I was like, this is the missing piece for me. It was the really being seen and walking the journey of you are so much more than your behaviors, so much more than the negative behaviors that I see on the floor in residential facility. They're really cries for help. Mm-hmm. And when I connected all of those pieces together and found EFT, and started going to an EFT therapist and playing around with EFT, that it really felt like this is the missing piece for me, where we can sure have behaviors and experiences and cognitive things going through our minds and our hearts, but it's really the tenderness, and it's really the vulnerability, and it's walking into those spaces that really make it more, and really make it deeper, more profound. I sometimes describe it as where you find the source of the bleeding, rather than just putting a Band-Aid on the bleeding. EFT and the work that I love doing is really getting to the heart of why the bleeding is happening in the first place.
Yeah, that's a really good way to say it. Getting to those core places, and then being able, so often in the behavioral or cognitive spaces, they're necessary and helpful, but it does feel like plucking weeds, and then the weeds grow back again because we just come up with new forms. And so when you can go to the source of the bleeding, you can see healing truly happen for the long haul.
Yeah.
So I love that in so many spaces. And I think a lot of counselors listening probably resonate at some point. You just feel like, is there something more? Is there something more? So when you sit with your new counselors, okay, I know you love being able to come alongside the ones that are fresh in school or outside of school, and they're really becoming the kind of therapist they want to be. What are some of the wisdom tidbits that you really kind of try to join them in or help them with along the way? So if you could give us a cognitive list, Michelle, what would that list look like?
Yeah, I would say imposter syndrome is a big piece. So really working through imposter syndrome, feeling like you deserve to be here and the world needs you. I can't show up for your clients in the same way that you can show up for your clients. And so sure, you could send all your clients to me, but you bring something really beautiful that I can't bring. So battling imposter syndrome is one. I talk a lot about staying in your lane, which is tied to that too. But when we are learning, we like to look at the fast lane next to us and see people talking with their hands when they're driving and carrying on conversation, and our hands are at 10 and 2 gripping the wheel. But there's something really, really important about staying in your lane, because there will always be different lanes for you to move into, and seeing the benefit of being in the lane, being in the learning space, and not rushing. Sometimes people really, really want to rush, and there's really important, necessary building blocks in the lane that you're in. Those two things come to mind. Self-care, we could do a whole podcast on self-care, but that's an important part of just finding your authentic self and not burning out. Being a beginner is really hard and confusing and overwhelming. And so learning really early on how to care and nurture for yourself, your authenticity, your own needs is a really important part of, I think, being more comfortable with being a learner.
I love that. And it really does parallel our clients. So the more we're comfortable staying in our own lane and going at the pace that we need to go, the better we're going to model that for our clients and give them that same presence and not rush them to be somewhere that they're not or not ready for.
Yes.
And so often clients put that pressure on themselves without our help. And so being able to be comfortable with where we're at as a therapist, they feel that. Clients feel that. There's a sense of grace. I really think God is the best trauma-informed counselor, in that he really paces with each of us, with where we're at, He gets our story. He knows our story before we even know it fully. But that idea that he just is not going, come on. And we have that voice for lots of reasons that's coming elsewhere, but that's not from God. He's not like, hurry it up. Come on. It's more of a, I'm with you. We'll take your time when you're ready. Okay, let's sit here for a little bit and see what this is like before we go to the next. So it's such a good word for therapists and counselors who are learning, be where you are, and there's good stuff happening right in that lane. There really is. And having new drivers, I'm like, that analogy works really well for me.
Stay where you are, 50 miles per hour.
No multitasking right now. Keep your hands on the wheel. Okay. So let's talk about self-care, because that actually aligns with seasoned counselors too. I think that's where I spend a lot of my coaching with therapists going, they've been doing this a while and they're starting to feel the weight of the secondary trauma. We talk about it cognitively, but there's some part of us that are all like, oh, that won't be me. Yeah. And then it's me. Yeah. So let's talk about self-care. What are some of the baseline principles, the practices that you've put in place and that you hope new counselors really start to learn along the way?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about self-care. Self-care generally we think of as journaling and massages and going for walks and reading. And those are really great forms of self-care. And I encourage people to do those things. Then there's another layer of self-care where, it's getting enough sleep and going to our medical appointments. And those things are really important too. For me, when I talk about self-care, when I do self-care, it comes down to two things for me. And the first one is listening within. Because my self-care and your self-care are completely different. So step one for me is listening within. What happens when I quiet myself, my being, my surrounding, and I listen? I'm really good actually at not listening. And so this step is really important because I can do all the tasks. I can go for the run and go for the walk, and I do all of the typical self-care. But if I don't listen, I could be missing it completely. So step one is listening within. And then the second step is responding in the most loving way possible. Sometimes we listen within, and what we hear, we don't want to do. And if we don't respond in the most loving way possible, we're actually rejecting our own needs, which leads to burnout. So you have to have both of those things. Sometimes when I listen within, it means I sleep in instead of getting up to work out. And working out is part of my self-care. But if I don't listen within, sometimes I can get unbalanced in my physical health and my physical needs. Sometimes when I listen within, it means that I step away from my family. I love my family and I pour into them, and I want to spend a lot of these important years with our daughter, Claire. And sometimes when I listen within, it means you need to go and be by yourself and have some time alone, which can be hard for me because I'm like, no, I want to be with my people, because that's really healthy too. But sometimes what I need is to not. And so it's tricky because I wish I could give you a list. I wish I could give you a manual, and it's not. It's really actually ambiguous, and it's hard to grasp. So you're right. I could give you like a cognitive list here too. But my inside, like all of my being is like, Michelle, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't give her a list. Even though I did already a little bit. But it's really doing the inside work. A part of it is reparenting ourselves and what we've needed for a long time and didn't get from others, and expect our partners or our friends to give to us. And we really have to learn how to give those things to ourselves and attune to ourselves. I dumped a lot.
No, I loved it. And I mean, if I summarized without dismissing all of what you're saying, the point is you're going back to like, you really got to figure out who you are and be comfortable with who you are. And I'm going to back up the truck a little bit and just say, and God's excited about who you are. Yes. And the way he made you is specific for the clients he wants you to serve
Yes,
and to be
yes.
with. And the way that you do self-care, you've got to really slow down and listen and not look over at somebody else's lane and be thinking, well, I should be doing it that way, when you got to know who you are, how you're wired. And some of that is the reparenting. So I can imagine some listeners being like, they're sounding really psychobabble. And I'm like, yes, we're two therapists, so let us talk. If you're a counselor, you're loving it. But the reparenting is something we're helping our clients do. And us as counselors, it doesn't just stop after you've figured it all out. We have to keep in step day to day. What does today need?
Yeah.
Tomorrow has its worries of its own. Focus on today. And I loved how you said, like, today I might not be working out. I actually might need to sleep in. And there are a lot of times when we do have to show up for our clients when we don't want to. Okay, so let's just talk about that. Because there are days where I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. I'd rather just watch a Hallmark movie and drink some tea. But I got 7 clients on my case list today. I need to join in and be with them. So let's talk about that. What do you do there, Michelle? How do you advise your supervisees as you walk with them in that space? Because that's a common one for counselors as well, and for any helper.
Yeah, I think discerning whether it is a day where you just got to get up and do those 7 sessions, or if it actually is a day where you need to consider canceling the sessions. And I think consulting with a colleague or a supervisor is a really good way at just discerning. Most of the time, though, you're going to probably land on, this is one of those days where I just have to get out of bed and do those 7 sessions. And it's one of those things where I have those days, and it feels really big and overwhelming when you're still in the bed or dragging your feet, walking around the house with your cup of coffee. And it's life changing when you follow through. So the days are rare where at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have just stayed in bed. Much more common at the end of the day, I'm like, the world needed me today. And look at how being with and sitting with clients actually was therapeutic for me too. It's this weird, I think we don't talk about it enough, but it is this weird, we get gifts and we receive as part of the therapeutic relationship too. And it's actually a really important part of our work. We don't give in the same ways that we do to friends, or receive, in the same way we do with friends. But at the end of the day, my life is changed when I show up with others.
It's such a beautiful point. And I always love seeing how God used how my morning started, or where I felt like I was showing up, how he even uses that in the room with clients. I've had many moments where I'm like tearing up and holding some really hard in my own personal life as I'm driving to the office. And then that vulnerability really allows me to enter spaces with clients that I wouldn't have otherwise. So if I had shut that door and said, well, I need to be all put together and ready. So I love the both and, that God uses that, and in ways that are beyond our expectations. His power is made perfect in our weakness.
Yeah.
And we also end up receiving things that we needed as well.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful recipient piece there. So as we wind down, Dr. Michelle, let's talk a little bit about your new book, specifically written for counselors. What was the motivation and the hope that you have as someone picks up this book, The Heart of Counseling, and then they put it down? What do you hope that they get out of this?
I hope that they feel validated. I hope that they feel that they're not alone. My hope is that their words are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that all these other people were thinking the same things about imposter syndrome, and whether our baggage was too much, whether our brokenness means we shouldn't be a counselor. And they really feel when they put the book down that their authentic self is enough. And not only is it enough, but it's a gift to their clients.
Love it. I'm so excited. Where can people get this book, The Heart of Counseling?
Yeah, it'll be available anywhere online books are sold. Amazon is a great one, a popular one.
Okay, wonderful. Now, we're excited to announce one of the first cohorts that we are doing for helpers. We'd love professional counselors, and whether they're in the early stages of their career. Dr. Michelle, you supervise in California, Washington, and Oregon. I supervise in Oregon. But for anyone around the world who would like to join us for a 2-year journey, we're going to walk alongside clinicians, young and more seasoned, who really want to be able to have a safe, confidential place. We'll be providing them with individual coaching. We're going to do group sessions where you and I are leading that and walking them through principles from Shrinking the Integrity Gap, the Heart of Counseling, and a whole bunch of other things that we have in store for these counselors. And then we're going to come together for some beautiful retreats, some very intentional time out here in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. So if that is something that you are interested in as a professional in the field, we would love to have you. We're limiting the space to probably around 10 to 12, and applications are open. You can go to livingwholehearted.com/cohort, and you'll see the helpers cohort there where you can learn all about dates and pricing. But we're so excited. We're excited to launch this fall, 2024. And I think we do this with our own clinicians. It's a part of the journey that we have as a team with our professional counselors and our executive coaches. And we just wanted to be able to extend that beyond. We know that counselors often feel very alone in their spaces and are overwhelmed. And it's important for us to learn a different way. You can be a healthy counselor who can stay in the field for the longevity of this work and find that whatever space and season you're in, you can adjust things along the way. As Michelle's saying, like, where am I? What do I need today? And so having someone like Dr. Michelle and I to come alongside you, who's been in the field many years in lots of different ways, we would be honored to do that with you. So definitely go to livingwholehearted.com/cohort, check out the helpers cohort. And then if you want to just connect with Dr. Michelle, whether you want some coaching or you want some counseling, or you just want to learn more about all the resources, the professional contributions she's given to the field, where can they go, Dr. Michelle?
Yeah, they can go to livingwholehearted.com and find my coaching, find my counseling. I have a book website, michelleengblom.com as well, that will have information about my book.
Okay, we'll have that in the show notes. And why don't you just end with one last word of encouragement for all the helpers out there listening? What would you like to say as we close today?
Yeah, my greatest encouragement is really realizing and embracing that you are your greatest intervention. Who you are and what you bring is the best tool that you will ever have as a counselor.
Amen.
If you can land there, it's a pretty important place to be.
It is. Frees us up from all of the other pulls on us and stressors. So, well, thank you for being with me today. And I really love doing this work with you, Dr. Michelle, and the gift it is, the privilege it is. So thank you for being with me today and just a part of the Living Wholehearted team.
Thanks, Tara. It's a privilege.
Thank you. And again, if you want professional counseling, if you just need to do your own work and get your baggage down to carry-on size, we've got an amazing team of people of both character and competency. You can go to livingwholehearted.com. You just want to be a part of our community learning. We have a newsletter. We'll send it out once a month where we're giving you ongoing resources. So thank you for being with us in this podcast. I hope you're encouraged today as we're helping leaders live with integrity in their life and their home, in their community, in their workspace. And professional counselors, we're with you. We're rooting for you. So thank you for joining us. Until next time, continue to grow and become the leader you would follow.
Well, did you know that we're not just podcasters? One of the best ways to connect with Tara and I and our whole team at Living Wholehearted is our website, livingwholehearted.com. There you're going to find the books that we've written, our e-courses, executive coaching, organizational development, and professional counseling services. And then one of our favorite things that we're up to these days, our wholehearted leadership cohorts, where we take groups of leaders for 1 to 2 year journeys together. It's amazing. While you're there, for fresh content, make sure that you sign up for our e-newsletter. That's where we're putting out stuff every month that you want to keep close with. So visit livingwholehearted.com.
You can also join us on socials at living_wholehearted on Instagram, and we are Living Wholehearted on Facebook. You can also follow me at Tara Matson on Instagram. We love to engage with you personally there, so make sure you reach out. Leave us a review if you're enjoying this podcast.
Hey, thank you for caring about being the kind of person and leader that lives with integrity.